Denial, offense, delirium, that's Jean-Luc Mélenchon's brain to me. He has the right to live in that world, which is the world of pure utopia. But this utopia is going to blow up in his face.
François Bousquet, hello.
Hello, Vincent. How are you? Yes, very well. Glad to see you again.
So, François, you wrote 2 books on anti-white racism.
Yes, 2. Anti-white racism, The Forbidden Investigation a year ago, and Dirty White, the racism we don't want to see. It's the second part, actually a diptych, so think of it as a diptych.
It's a massive phenomenon, but one we're not allowed to talk about.
Yes, academics haven't documented it at all. It's an empty body of work, which is fascinating. When you go to a university library, there are miles of books about white racism, about systemic racism, about all kinds of racism, except the one against whites, which can't be mentioned. It's something people don't even think about, a blind spot. The phrase is literally anti-white racism doesn't exist. As you said, it's a huge phenomenon for me, the background noise of society. When you go on youth discussion forums, Reddit, juvideo.com, you're stunned by the avalanche of first-hand accounts. Reddit asks a question at some point. A guy asks a question. She's white. Have you experienced anti-white racism? You see hundreds of first-hand accounts scroll by. And none of that exists. None of that can appear in a mainstream media outlet. It's impossible. I've never been on a mainstream public broadcaster. It's not even possible to talk about it, so it's a major taboo. Whereas, if I stick to the latest poll, actually the very first one, the first poll commissioned by the LICRA, just to be clear, that's the LICRA, not the National Rally, by IFOP with a sample of 14,000 people, that's huge. 39% of French people are perceived as white. That's how pollsters define skin color, perceived as white, which already implies a kind of racism. That's roughly 20 million French people. And tonight we didn't really talk. So that's why I wrote the book, well, the 2 books, because I met a lot of people actually through our jobs. I'm a bookseller, a publisher, a journalist. I meet young people who are 20 years old. I was born in '68, but I didn't experience the family background at school. For me, there was one Arab in my senior year. And I come across young people who are 20 years old, apprentices, interns, who tell me crazy things in Oisé, in Essonne, in schools where they are minorities, demographic minorities, where anti-white racism is really the underlying issue. So that's all we hear. And I handed them the microphone like you are now. I get an audio recording if you want.
So the left, the sociologists, sociologists who are mostly left-wing would respond that these are just individual hostilities. For something to be considered racism, this hostility has to be systemic, and it has to come from above. That's actually the thing that makes them claim that what you're saying isn't racism.
Yes, no, they don't want to acknowledge the connection with sociology, gender studies, or decolonialism. That's Eric Fassin. He's French, but you could call him Franco-American. He introduced these American theories to France. He says the following: for social sciences, that's his word. For social sciences, anti-white racism doesn't exist. That's dogma. There you go, that's dogma, supposedly because there is systemic racism that deeply structures society. 2 things.
Dont les blancs seraient à l'origine.
In fact, nevertheless, France is a country of white people, and Europe more broadly is too. So you could imagine that in this kind of country, there is still white privilege. There is a Han privilege in China. There is Fulani privilege in Senegal or in Africa. But that's not the case to begin with. And then we put the unemployed person in Vierzon and the trader in Neuilly on the same level. The unemployed person in Vierzon, is a victim of massive class-based racism. He votes for Marine Le Pen because he's tired of being a blind spot in academic sociology. So for me, this theory of systemic racism is Lysenkoism. What's Lysenkoism? It's Lysenko. Lysenko was a Soviet pseudoscientist who claimed that genetics doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And for 40 years, he monopolized Soviet pseudoscience to say it's the same thing. These guys are telling us the same thing. Systemic racism prevents us from seeing anti-white racism. It's neither marginal nor residual, but I won't call it systemic. In worlds that have been greatly replaced, it's systematic. We can't see or say it because some sociologists live in gentrified neighborhoods and spend their lives cheating. They spend their lives cheating, those guys. They have residential segregation, school segregation for their children, but nevertheless they preach mixing, including ethnic mixing, without seeing it, without practicing it. But the people I see, the witnesses I see, are guys who have been subjected to this mixing, or boys and girls who have been subjected to this mixing. This mixing puts them under intense pressure.
So would you say there is deep down a hatred from part of the population towards white people in France?
Really, it's structured. Listen, that's the conclusion I've come to. I wanted to call my second part not dirty white, the racism we don't want to see. I wanted to call it, why do they hate us so much? I didn't do it because I don't want to essentialize categories of people. But for me, that's still the heart of the matter. It's one thing to call someone a dirty white, a fucking Frenchman, a shitty whitey, or some fragile whitey. That's one thing. But why is there so much hatred behind it? It's an intransitive hatred, intransitional. For me, that's the heart of my second book, right there. For me, it's resentment. And sociology doesn't want to look at resentment. It constantly hides behind social causes. Sociology of misery, misery of sociology. That's miserabilism. Actually, the young non-Europeans are like street urchins. They're street urchins from marginalized neighborhoods and victims of high unemployment. Yes and no. Looking at social indicators, they're the poorest in France. And behind that, there's a parallel economy. Drugs are a 7 billion euro annual business in France. Prostitution, 3 billion, so there's money in the neighborhoods. For me, it's post-poverty. So poverty doesn't explain this rage. Where does this rage come from? For me, that's the heart of the matter. I think it's an ancestral rage, centuries old. We have to look it straight in the eye. To explain this, la hagra, there's an Arabic word. It came up again after the death of the influencer, the streamer, J.P. Parmanoff. Pardon. We talked about hagra. Do you remember? Yes, they want to shame you. Why do they want to shame you? What's going on? A desire to humiliate, yes, to humiliate, to defile, to dirty, to belittle, to dominate, yes, to dominate or to counter-dominate. And what's the secret driving force behind all this? I think it's resentment. Resentment, that's Nietzsche. Resentment, that's Dostoevsky. It's the ill-born man. I believe some people are born wrong. They're putting on a charade about immigration for us. It's an opportunity for them and for us. I don't think it's an opportunity for us or for them either. They're born wrong. They aren't from here. They're nowhere. They are out of touch. They're underground creatures, as Dostoevsky says. People from the underground. The underground is a poisonous, toxic world that produces this toxic substance called resentment. What is resentment? It's the sickness of comparison. I want to emphasize comparison. Comparison is the true source of suffering. I think you're more handsome than me. I think you're smarter than me. I think you're braver than me. That's what an unfavorable comparison is. And we don't want to make the effort to put ourselves in the mindset, I don't want to generalize, of a Muslim who is caught in a trap. For me, in a psychological trap. It's the unfavorable comparison with the West. Islam has been falling behind historically for 1,000 years. It's not possible that this doesn't deeply affect the Islamic psyche. It's not possible. When I compare myself, I feel disheartened. When I look at myself, I feel comforted. They can't tell themselves that. It's impossible.
Yet they are French. They could say to themselves,
I'm French. Me, I'm French. Great. Great. Vincent Lapierre. I'll switch to French. I'll answer you. The second point is that in the Islamic psyche, there's the idea that we are the religion of religions, which completes the religions of the book. We are stronger than the Jews. We are stronger than the Christians because we came last. We do accomplish that, so people feel torn between these temptations. Yes, so as you said, they're Christians. It's huge. The mayors.
to say, I'm French like you, but...
Simply they hide behind that. And these are blind spots of anti-white racism. How can people, or anti-French in this case, how can people who are French, technically, administratively, they have the card, the ID, whatever, could be anti-French. Same thing, resentment. The paradox is that there's a paradox of nationality. People were granted a nationality on paper while they reject it. And you could imagine that, it strikes me as well. One could imagine that the longer a family has been in France, 2, 3, 4 generations, which is often the case for North Africans, one could imagine that young North Africans are truly French. But no, it's the opposite. When you look at surveys about how some Muslims support Sharia law, the younger you are, the more you support it. So actually there's a radicalization of attitudes among people who have been in France for 2, 3, or 4 generations. So it's not working. Mass immigration doesn't work. You can assimilate an individual, not an entire people. But when we get to the scale we're dealing with, we're talking about millions of people. These are entire peoples. How do you assimilate entire peoples? You can't. So another observation I've made in my investigations into anti-white racism is that the general rule is separatism. You can't say it. All anyone talks about is social mixing. In reality, people separate themselves. And it's not me saying it, it's François Hollande who says it. François Hollande avoids mentioning civil war. A president shouldn't say that. He discusses partition instead. Are we heading towards partition? Partition is everywhere. Except that what I call the elite white left-wing sociologist journalist at Radio France, for me, it's the elite white who is the negative counterpart of the poor white, who on the other hand is despised, snubbed and belittled. Because he's presumed to be a voter for Marine Le Pen or Henri Zemmour, it doesn't matter. Even the upscale white liberal is separatist. What is gentrification? It's separatism. So it doesn't work, that world doesn't work.
Is the second phase of the play precisely? We have these populations on one side and on the other, the upscale white liberal promoting everything we're experiencing.
Yes, but by cheating, he spends his life cheating. Another one, that's Tartuffe. Tartuffe, the most famous line from Molière's Tartuffe is cover up, that's what I cannot bear to see. A time of prudishness, of religious revival in which Molière is not comfortable. For them it's cover up, which I can't stand to see. So they're everywhere, I mean. It's not me saying it, I mean. It's social media, outlets like Liberation or Mediapart or even NUPES. In 2022, remember when Rokhaya Diallo saw the NUPES deputies, she said, "Damn, but I'm blinded, there are only white people." If you also saw the France Insoumise intergroup just recently, which decided on the candidacy, for Mélenchon's fourth run for president in 2027, there are only white people. These are all white people, yet they keep promoting diversity.
For the editorial staff of Liberation, humanity is everyone.
Everyone. So actually, I end up saying that the rhetoric is maximalist. Let's open up, live together, mix together, creolize ourselves. But their actual behavior is minimalist. Me, let's say I'm a left-wing academic, I have kids, I live in the 19th or 20th district in Paris, I'm going to put them in private school. That won't stop me from espousing openness and social mixing, but in reality, I'm cheating because I'm going to protect my children. My building in the gentrified neighborhoods is monochrome. It is ethnically homogeneous, culturally homogeneous, religiously homogeneous. The café terraces, for me, like Rokhaya Diallo, they make me feel blinded. The café terraces in the 19th arrondissement, damn, But you can't say it. If you say it, well, you're racist. If you say it, you're labeled as a far-right guy, and I think that's where the left's sectarianism comes from. What they hate about us is that we expose the lie. We're not allowed to challenge the lies. What is a lie? It's social cheating. It's the gap between words and actions. As we say, we tell them, you're lying, you defend diversity, but not for yourselves, not for your children, not for your wife. What they hate about us is that we tear off the mask.
They would say that what they hate about you is your racism. They would say that you are racist. They would say that you essentialize. By talking about these populations and so on, you're essentializing.
Yes, I don't want to essentialize, I don't want to generalize. It's either foolish or criticizes multicultural society. In the multicultural society, there is no longer a common foundation. So we are sent back to our identities, our most basic identities. In a multicultural society, I believe the only shared trait is skin color. And this common denominator is explosive. Let's be clear, I'm not praising it, it's just an observation. I regret it. It's like the Tower of Babel collapsing and turning into a pit of Babel. The Bible warned us. Balkan and Lebanese societies show us this as well. Those societies are collapsing because we are reduced to the most minimal sense of belonging. Skin color. I don't want to. I'm not the one essentializing. It's the multicultural society that forces us to essentialize it. Yes, I see. I can't do anything about it. It feels like when you're walking, we're here. This is Gare du Nord.
Of course.
When you're walking around, there's real social mixing.
You could be told that it's working. Look, here's the proof. You see people...
They live...
together, they're...
Yes. See, no, people are crossing paths. It's a trompe-l'œil effect. People cross paths but never meet. Because as soon as they meet, they create defense mechanisms, social distancing. Similar to the COVID era, I can't help it. We adopt protective measures, consciously or not, because we're social animals. We're social animals, I can't help it. As social animals, we're often driven by herd behavior. We're often driven, again, I'm sorry, but all of this is just a facade, an act, the charade of social mixing. We imagine that it's going to work, but as soon as there's tension, Nail, remember, PSG's victory against Inter Milan. I mean, nobody died because of it. Those were riots just for fun. Well, all of a sudden, this world of facades, this huge Potemkin village, from the name, of animalism, Catherine the Great was led to believe Russia was wealthy in the late 18th century by being shown trompe-l'œil facades. The situation here is similar.
It's the Potemkin village of coexistence.
Yeah, it's Marshall McLuhan's global village, the whole fantasy of a unified earth, of universalism. So it's really the global village. And well, the global village is a Potemkin village.
Yes, you're pointing out the failure of universalism. Yes.
But how could you not point it out? We pretended, we Europeans, since the Enlightenment, to believe in universalism. We're the only ones who believe in it, others don't. Universalism makes a Chinese person laugh. The Chinese person thinks that civilizational fulfillment is China, it's the Middle Kingdom, so it already makes them laugh. Let's say we've put on Universalism, this comedy. When it was about assimilating white people, I can't help it, that's just how it is. The Republic claims to be colorblind and indifferent to differences, but that's only because no differences existed. The Pole, I love Raymond Coppa's line, Coppa. He used to say, in northern France, we lived well, there were French people. He wasn't talking about himself, because he's Polish, Italians and Poles, But on Sundays, we were French at Mass, we were Christians at Mass, that's what Coppa said. So we could play this unlikely comedy of universalism, which to me is a deadly fantasy, because it was the same people integrating the same people, As soon as we have to integrate populations that are, from a relational or religious point of view, antagonistic, if not hostile, well, all of a sudden, this house of cards, which is universalism, collapses, and it collapses on us, right?
The issue with this universalism is that while it's a beautiful and appealing idea, we want to believe we'll all live together and hold hands. It's wonderful, and we want to believe it.
No, wait, I know that. That's why our position is uncomfortable, because we want to be universalist. Well, me, because I belong to a school of thought of the new right that is very attached to what we call differentialism, We think the world is all the more beautiful, all the richer, when there is a plurality of languages, peoples, cultures, and so on. It makes a magnificent mosaic, On the other hand, if we follow through with universalism, it's a world that's undifferentiated, it's a world that's been flattened, where all the differences have been erased, Yeah. Nevertheless, it still carries an ideal that can be appealing, For me, that ideal could be the laws of hospitality, for example, which are sacred laws in all its actions. That's how it should be. When a stranger comes to your home, you open your door to them, That's a universal law, truly universal.
But behavior?
Yeah, it depends on two things, on their path. Yeah, but it depends on two things, The first thing is they shouldn't stay, The law of hospitality only works if the foreigner leaves. That's why we're hospitable, yeah. And the other thing is that they respect our rules, And us, we're stuck. They don't respect our rules and they stay, So simply, but what the left would say is...
Yes, but they have nowhere else to go.
Yeah, no, they keep inventing lies. No. First of all, it's only boys who come, The other day I was in Calais. You must have done reports there. That's where the jungle was. I went there 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, of course. Calais, there are 70 kilometers of fences, Actually, Calais is a wall, It's an enclosure, fenced off by electric fences. Now, the migrants who go to England are elsewhere, not just in Calais. But that's the price to pay, People who, they're attracted by the city lights, They're attracted by our lifestyles, by our phones, by wealth, that keeps burning.
Francois, when you say that, the left sees them. They're going to say that's racism.
Yeah. I repeat myself every time, but I don't want to generalize. I just mean we're in a trap, We're in a trap, a moral one that you pointed out. It's more comfortable to say we have to welcome the stranger than not to welcome them, It's morally rewarding. We all want to be nice. I don't want to be part of the empire of evil. I want to be on the good side. I'm actually a nice guy. It's hard to say no.
It's for yourself in everyday life.
It's definitely hard to say no to someone. Well, we have to learn to say no. And then there's a demographic trap, you know. Not only is there a moral trap, but there's also a demographic trap. At some point, it's no longer about immigration. It's about something else, you know. If I stick to the orders of magnitude, you know, or to borrow the title of Bernard Louvain's book, How We Became the Colonies of Our Colonies, you know, except that we had 1 million Africans in Algeria, there were 1 million Europeans. It's nothing, 1 million. I mean, you know, for us, we're talking about numbers on an absolutely insane scale. So what should I call it? Submersion? Colonization?
Well, he would tell you that in Algeria, the whites dominated the local population, the natives, which is not the case here in this colonization.
It's starting to happen. It's starting to happen. We're talking about white privilege. White privilege was theorized, well, theorized is a big word, by a bourgeois, an American aristocrat loaded with money, right? She's the one who pushed the idea that flesh-colored bandages, you know, were discriminatory against non-white people. So you get the idea. But I don't see it that way myself. When I watch French television series or commercials, I don't see white privilege. I see a creolized privilege. In England, I said this, I was saying this recently. In England, with their population, they have more ethnic data than we do, more ethnic statistics. With a black population estimated at 4%, there are more than 50% of commercials, you know, that feature black people, right? They're actually the ones obsessed with this. They're always the ones making things about race. I'm just following their narrative. They're the ones who always bring up race. Except that there's only one race that doesn't, well, race, it's a social construct, you know. The only one they don't seem to mention is white people, which is banned because our whole society is based on asymmetry. There is a fundamental asymmetry in our society. This asymmetry is that the victims are always people of color and the perpetrators and oppressors are always white people. I'm sorry, I was talking about the unemployed guy from Vierzon or the minimum wage worker from Vesoul, you know. Honestly, that guy has no systemic privilege, you know. He gets no social recognition, you know. He's invisible. It's a total blind spot. Electoral, sociological, you know, there.
He could answer you. I see them coming. And it's not entirely wrong. He would say to you, but wait, that's too much. Those who are discriminated against when getting hired, those who are discriminated against when trying to buy property or find housing and so on. It's not white people. He'd tell you that.
Yeah, simply, it's always the same surveys, you know, for the past 10 years that give the same numbers, you know, about systemic racism. That's what fuels the theory of systemic racism. That's basically it, you know. 30% of non-Europeans are discriminated against in hiring with equivalent resumes, you know, who are discriminated against when it comes to buying or renting property. Also, you know, by the police, right? These studies are always biased. It's crazy. The Ministry of Labor or the Interior Ministry conducts them, but they never focus on peripheral France where I live. And I don't think they're interested. They never put themselves in Kevin's place, you know, or Jordan's. Now you might say, but no, there's Jordan Bardella. That first name is becoming normalized. 10 years ago, a best-selling book called The Curse of the Kevins was popular. That doesn't interest them. In Germany, there's a tool called, it's a joke, you know, but the Kevinometer, you know. That is the social distance between Kevin and the top of society. It's massive. They aren't interested. I'm a former Parisian. Paris, there's me, I'm old. Paris in the 70s and 80s, there were working class people in Paris. The front used to get big results in the 80s and 90s, you know, in the inner suburbs of Paris, but also in the wealthy districts of Paris. In 1990, the front collapsed because there was white flight, you know, because the working class people leave. They have direct experience of real life. They're together. They see that it doesn't work. These are the witnesses I interviewed in my 2 books. I see them. The guys, they tell me, I'm in Paris. I don't see it, you know, this, you know, but it's 5 kilometers from my place. In the 80s, they tell me, well, they slaughter sheep, you know, in the 80s, they slaughter sheep in the parking lot, you know. As a kid, I saw streams of blood under the parking lot. Bégodeau and the others laugh at that, but that's what they tell me, you know. They left. But you have no research, you have no study from the Ministry of Labor about them. I think it's the biggest French exodus since 40 during the phony war, when the Germans came in like it was nothing. In France, you know, after that, there were the Ardennes, there was a huge exodus, you know, but after that, it was a one-time exodus, you know. This is a colossal exodus, you know. We're talking about 5 million, maybe 10 million people. So I'm talking about ordinary white folks. But there are no studies. Can you believe it? There are no studies on the economic cost of the internal exile of the working classes. This is about the working class starting from the 1980s. All my sources tell me that. All my sources experienced anti-white racism going back 50 years. It's a pattern we've ignored for decades, and my testimonies are half a century old. And they tell me that at the turn of the 70s and 80s in suburbs like Les Ulis, like Les Mureaux and so on, we see a suburban exodus with white working class people leaving because the migratory pressure on them is enormous. Honestly, I don't care, but it's on his mind. We're talking about a colossal reconstruction cost because they're going to create, there are loans to build your apartment, your house, sorry. All of that costs money. So they too have been victims of a form of class-based racism that people don't want to see. And one small objection, put yourself in an employer's shoes. Do you want there to be a prayer room at your place, in your company? It's not that I'm legitimizing discrimination, but there's a report from 2015 or 2000, I don't know exactly, about the reality. Islamic radicalization in the Paris transit system, at Paris airports, prayer rooms, refusing to shake hands with a woman, food, of course, halal food. Maybe an employer doesn't want this extra cost, which is a financial extra cost, but it's also an extra cost. I don't want to say symbolic, but do you want to have a prayer room? If one day you have a big company, do you want there to be a prayer room? If you don't want to, maybe you'll reconsider who you hire when your word is final.
That's where Mélenchon responds. He solves this problem by saying, we have to accept the great replacement of one generation by another. That's how it is. And tomorrow, France will no longer be majority white.
It's no longer France.
For him, that will be France. It's the new France.
Yes, simply France doesn't exist for him. Having taken quite an interest in Mélenchon, especially the first Mélenchon, the one from 2017, that's a Mélenchon who defines himself as a populist. At the time, I don't know if you remember, neither right nor left, it's hard to recall. 10 years later, and back then, his favorite authors were Chantal Mouffe and Ernesto Laclau. So, they're theorists of left-wing populism. An Argentine, a Belgian, and their big idea is that the people don't exist. The people is an empty signifier. It only exists when it becomes political. And for the rest, it's an empty shell, the people. You can put whatever you want in it. You can put Africans in it, Martians, it doesn't matter. It becomes the people only when, in a political deliberative assembly, it establishes itself as the people. So Mélenchon, he's not interested in France. It's nothing more than the name of a lack of identity, a rejection of what France is. France, there was a France before the revolution. I mean, France goes back to the Gauls, the Celts, even before that. Mélenchon doesn't care about France's history.
For him, it's a universalist idea. It's precisely the fact that it has no identity. That's exactly it. He defines France by emptiness.
Yes, by emptiness, you're right, but the EU works the same way. With Mélenchon, Mélenchon has a quality. Like Uriah Boutelja, like others, he has a quality. It's that he calls a spade a spade. He calls the great replacement the great replacement. He doesn't hide behind words by sugarcoating them. So he owns the words. He just twists them. He sees the great replacement's negative connotations as positives. It's colonization, the new France. All the better he puts words to it, which the EU doesn't. But the EU, it's the same approach. What is Europe? For Mélenchon and for the EU, it's not a territory, land, or people. It's an idea. Europe is an idea. They believe the universalist idea is so beautiful that it should become universal. Europe will only truly be Europe if it is the whole world. It's an idea, not a territory. The territory exists. The territory is a place of friction, of fear, of power struggles, of antagonism, of interaction, often negative interaction. He doesn't want to see that. I'd like to impose that. A strong word, sorry, but I think it's relevant. There you go. What I call the law of the 3Ds, which in my opinion defines the cognitive dissonance of cultural leftism. The massive hypocrisy, the big gap between the left hand preaching diversity and the right hand distancing itself from it, which is cheating. That's the law of the 3Ds. The first D is denial. Reality doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So reality is inadmissible. We don't want to see the problems caused by mass migration, insecurity, and so on. We don't want to see it. The first D is for denial. The second D, you and I are victims of it. It's D for delinquency. Once we acknowledge reality exists, it becomes open to legal action. For example, if I talk about the makeup of customers in class and say there's only one white person left, there are immediate reports to Arcom. It's immediate. So it's subject to legal action. And the third D is the D of Mélenchon. D as in delusion. We're living in a huge delusion. Women are not women. Men are not men. Trans people, sex doesn't exist. It's a crazy delusion. Cleopatra, when Netflix decides to make Cleopatra, I don't remember if it's Netflix or the BBC. No, it's Netflix. Cleopatra is black. But where do you get that Cleopatra is black from? Cleopatra was European. She's Greek, a Macedonian. When the BBC mentions the children of Alexander, yes, we're at the heart of it. She's a Ptolemy. When the BBC decides to portray Eleanor of Aquitaine, who is one of our greatest queens, but a strange queen because she was Queen of France, and then after that she was Queen of England, she's black. That's just crazy. The crazy thing is imagining that this unreal world will last, will hold together. So it's 3D, denial, offense, delusion. That's Jean-Luc Mélenchon's mind to me. He has the right to live in that world, which is a world of pure utopia. But this utopia is going to blow up in his face. David Giraud was elected. This is Roubaix, but in 6 or 7 years it will be a sectarian candidate, probably an Islamist, who will be elected in his place. So he's going to be highly placed. It's funny the way they consent to their own disappearance. Maybe they even think it's a good thing. That's not true. They're cheating. For me, cheating is the main issue. They spend their lives cheating because they make a living from it. I didn't say it earlier. They make a living from it. Me, if I profess Mélenchon's ideas, I could be a professor at the Collège de France. I could have a chair at Jussieu or at Tolbiac. I would have a regular spot at Radio France. They make a living from it. I could join a CAC 40 company. In CAC 40 companies, you have what's called CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility, with an inclusivity charter. Actually, there's also an economic calculation involved. I'm not sure I'm totally selfless. I don't think so. Besides, they give themselves raises when they get to the... Yes, they give themselves raises. The day we turn off the money tap for the associations, it's going to hurt them. Maybe they'll defend their global rainbow in France with less enthusiasm. So yes, I think they mostly do, if you allow me to correct you. No, they don't want to be replaced. The proof is that the intergroup that comes to attack Mélenchon for the 4th time as the LFI candidate is made up of only white people. So, they don't want to be replaced. However, they accept that we, Europeans, we French, are replaced. As long as the small caste, the small civilized minority, as long as they are not replaced, and they keep pulling the strings like puppeteers, that's what Rima Hassan says. Rima Hassan claims the spokesperson's time is over, but it's not. The proof is, look at the intergroup that made Mélenchon a candidate. There's no Rima Hassan in it. So it doesn't apply to them. Basically, they're cheaters. I love Molière. For me, French genius is Molière, because he believes in Christianity, but without really believing in it. He doesn't believe, he defends children against their parents and arranged marriages. Tartuffe is brilliant. Tartuffe cheats. What is Tartuffe? It's a display of ostentatious but false virtues. He pretends to convince the other Tartuffes he's devout. Back then, you would call him a religious hypocrite. And it's the same thing today. All these anti-racists are fake anti-racists. I'll say it again. They don't practice in their daily lives the worldview that they claim to have. Everything is fake, and if it's fake, it's in that crack in the lie that their standard of living thrives. A gentrified neighborhood is expensive. You need a lot of money to buy in a gentrified area, increasingly so. It's not just poor people, though some precarious intellectuals are present. How can we expose this lie? I'll say it again because it strikes me.
By saying that it's a lie?
Yes, by saying first it's a lie, by pointing out their hypocrisy. You're Tartuffes, you are. So, I'm sorry for the references, but Hegel, the great philosopher Hegel, he talked about the beautiful soul. During communism, they were called beautiful souls. According to Hegel, a beautiful soul is like Tartuffe. It's someone who takes refuge in a utopia. But utopia is up in the clouds, it never has to face the test of reality. So again, it's really comfortable. You defend the Tower of Babel, a universal world where everyone loves everyone, like a Care Bear world. But they're not Care Bears, they're gremlins, I think. I see. François?
Let's pause at this building for a moment. Every time I pass by, I find it gorgeous. This is the Gare du Nord. When in Paris, if you go through Gare du Nord, pause to admire the building's architecture. They renovated it not long ago. And it's a marvel. This building is a marvel. It's marvelous.
There's a bear out front, kind of unexpected, but hey, it's awesome.
And then there's someone, it feels like we're in Calcutta. Yes, but really, yes.
Ah ouais.
This station is beautiful but strange.
It's splendid.
I'm no longer a Parisian, but I had friends from Hungary and other places, and I often used this station. And since I took it so often, I ended up saying that the Gare du Nord is a station with two entrances. We're on the forecourt when we walk around. In front of us, there are high-speed trains. So these are people who are going to England. So they're English hipsters. I'm not sure if they vote conservative, but it doesn't matter, center-left, center-right. So it's a fairly wealthy station, even if people often get assaulted. Back then I wasn't assaulted, that's not the right word, harassed. And if you go down one level, that's the RER. That's a different station and crowd. Richard Millett wrote a book called Paris, Lower Belly about the RER. The RER is like endless intestines with a completely different crowd. It's funny, it's a culture shock people avoid at Gare du Nord. Upstairs there are Europeans and often what I call big whites. Downstairs are non-Europeans. These two worlds cross paths but never overlap. Because one group takes the TGV and the other takes the TR or the RER. This station is funny, really schizophrenic. You're right, it's great. I went through there the other day. Beauvais, Lille, Amiens, Rouen, Arras, Lens. Cities with stunning cathedrals like Beauvais and Lens. That's France. That's no longer France, it's something else now. And yet it's magnificent. Calais, I was talking about Calais earlier. Saint-Quentin. There are wealthy cities, I'll say, that still remain wealthy. Well, these are stations that little by little are taking on a different cultural character. Here's another thing that strikes me. God knows I'm not a Huntingtonian after Samuel Huntington of The Clash of Civilizations. Well, actually, I do like him. One of his books is called Who Are We? Because he addresses American identity with honesty and intelligence. But The Clash of Civilizations, well, geopolitics followed other interests. But on the other hand, what struck me in these 2 or 3 years that I've been investigating anti-white racism is that the Clash of Civilizations is domestic. It's here, actually. It's not in the Middle East. It's not in the tribal areas of Pakistan or in Afghanistan. The clash is here. It's here, at the foot of the apartment blocks. I spent 10 years of my life working with Serbs, whom I love. I love Slavic literature. I worked at Lajdom. World's largest Slavic literature catalog outside Russia. Damn, what the Turks did to the Serbs is crazy. It's a blood tax. That means there were raids on the Serbian and Balkan elites. They took children. They made these children Janissaries, the elite army of the Ottomans and Turks. The Barbary pirates. The Barbary pirates, it's... Today people talk about 1 million, 2 million, 3 million Europeans who were enslaved. When you look into the literature about slave markets, there's a large English language bibliography on this subject. The top prize in Eastern markets was the white woman. And if she had blue eyes on top of that, she was like a cash register. So colonies aren't a zero-sum game. We colonized, we were colonized, we enslaved, we were enslaved. Obviously, if we constantly look back, if we're always looking in the rearview mirror, that's all we see. But we must not forget in that regard very well. We must not forget Lebanon. We must not forget, as I said, the Balkans. Yeah, we must not forget all of that. I mean, so, no, but we keep going back to the idea of the privileged white elite. It's that, as a white person, a regular white guy, which is my case, you're the big villain of history. Yeah, I'm the big villain, that's it. I'm carrying a negativity that I can't escape from. For us, it's a trap, of course. So, no, damn, history is much more subtle, you know. And then there's even a trick of history that's going to turn against them, because when I mentioned David Giraud, that's already the case in Saint-Saint-Denis, you know. Elected officials resemble the population. Well, little by little, we're going to replace the leadership of LFI with... And where will they go? Are they going to join us? I don't know. Flee abroad? I have no idea. I know several witnesses of anti-white racism who have gone into exile. It's crazy, right? I even have a witness in South Korea who has applied for refugee status there. The first time it was refused. He's going to submit it again, because in South Korea, usually refugees come from North Korea. Well, no, he comes from Toulouse, you know. He was bullied at school, all that. Who doesn't want to live there anymore. I have people who are at the ends of the earth who fled violence. It's crazy, you know. We spend our time welcoming so-called refugees, you know. Well, it's our own people, you know, who are becoming refugees. Who in Poland. I have one in Texas and many in Asia. And the guy, he's waiting impatiently. I hope he'll finally get it, because it would be a very strong symbolic gesture, you know, if the South Koreans grant him refugee status for fleeing French violence, you know.
Francois, to conclude, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We could talk or even make another video. I think we could walk around Paris and talk for 3 or 4 hours.
Thank you.
Merci.
That's really cool.
I really want to go see my girlfriend.
That's awesome. Oh, well, thank you very much.
Are you Latino?
That's right. You too? Yeah.
Me too. My parents immigrated here and it's changed a lot since then.
Well, yeah. And where are you from exactly?
They're Colombians from Colombia. Me,
I was born. They're Colombians like my mom.
immigrants. They fled Pablo Escobar and came here and well.
It's not, and they end up with Escobar.
Quite a few Latin Americans who feel the same way I do.
Obviously. Well, look, you see, before we wrap up, same thing. A guy born in Villefontaine, Franco-Italian, whose grandparents lived in a shanty town in Guerlain at the end of the war in 1950. The guy, great, but Villefontaine has been one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in France for the past 30 to 40 years, with a very strong migrant presence and large industrial sites. Well, the guy, he's a Spanish baron, and he's married to a Peruvian woman. The guy was a victim of anti-white racism. He's a Zemmour supporter, even as an expatriate. But I mean, you can't say he's racist. His wife is Peruvian. She very clearly looks Peruvian. And he took off, you know. And like her, like that girl, her parents are fleeing the drug lords, and they end up with mafia helpers. Damn, I'm horrible.
It's incredible. So, Francois, to conclude this fascinating discussion, realistically, where are we headed?
First of all, separation is already the rule. Separatism is the rule. I see separatism everywhere.
Yes, but in concrete terms.
Yes, in concrete terms, for example, there's a guy who's already a victim of anti-white racism from a working class background who lives in the suburbs. And one day he hears one of his neighbors who's black talking with a Salafist. The Salafist then tells him this. He notices my white witness and feels a bit embarrassed. I left Paris. But he doesn't say I left Paris because in my class there were too many white people. He says in my class there were too many doctors. That's the way he puts it. So as not to offend my white witness, it means that this Islamist segregation isn't something he suffers. It's something he chooses. It's that he makes an explicit choice. He will be in a totally Islamized environment. In France, of course, not in the Maghreb. So that means it's self-segregation. That's already something. When I talk about the big white people in the gentrified neighborhoods, what are they doing? Self-segregation. What did the working class people do in the 1980s and 1990s when they left the working class neighborhoods of the big cities? Not just Paris, I mean Toulouse, Bordeaux, all of them. What do? They practice separatism. Yeah, they practice separatism. So the historical moment we're living in is separation. What Jérôme Fourquet calls the archipelization of France. You know, with isolated communities, that's it. Gentrified neighborhoods in big cities are enclaves, according to Guy Louis. So here we are. And the separation, we're trying to avoid civil war. That's it. Partition, when François Hollande talks about partition, it means he doesn't want to... We've pushed back the grim prospect of civil war. Maybe it will work, simply it means that France will become like a leopard's skin, with micro-societies that no longer interact with each other, with this looming threat hanging over us, civil war, with internal borders. Internal borders, that's right, the borders are within our own country. So that means our country has fractured, has collapsed on... No, our country has imploded, that's what it means. It's an implosion, it hasn't exploded. An explosion would be civil war. I don't want to talk about it because guys always say I'm fantasizing about civil war. I'm not. I'm warding it off. I don't want it because I know that... So what do? We have this migration-driven civil war. At this point, no one in France does it unless the National Rally comes to power. It's the only party that might be in a position to have it. We're starting to ask questions. My publishing house just released a book by Jean-Yves Le Gallou called Remigration. Either we start considering remigration. Nicolas Samonti, in his book on the myths of immigration, devotes a chapter to voluntary return policies for Poles, Italians, and Spaniards. Spanish people at the end of the 1930s, just before the war. So we've already done it in the past, even though we're talking about people who assimilated, who became soccer players, Raymond Kopa, all that. So it's difficult to answer that question. What do we do? One of the witnesses told me, Mr. Bousquet, he called me Mr. Bousquet, he's a Zemmour supporter. He said, Mr. Zemmour, do you realize there's a lot of work in watching Zemmour's videos when he was a teenager? He told me, Zemmour, it's not 5 minutes to midnight, it's midnight. But like in the lottery, we tell ourselves that maybe our lucky number will come up. But it's too late. Yeah, it's really late. So I don't want to always send a negative signal. There is always the unexpected in history, said Weiner. A black swan appears from time to time, an unexpected event that can overturn a course of history that seems written in advance. That's Nicholas Nassim Taleb, an American Lebanese guy, a brilliant guy, really brilliant. And he's the one who came up with the theory of the black swan. So it's the theory of an event that alters history's course, for better or worse. That's our voluntarism. What you're doing, Vincent, what I'm doing too, what many of us are doing, we're trying to reverse or change the course of things, the inexorable course of things, because we're dealing with demographic forces. Et comment on fait pour... Demography is about major trends with forces of inertia that we can't control, because overnight you can stop one thing, but demography you can't, precisely because it has that momentum. That momentum is inertia. So these are powerful forces, but if we keep talking about it, if you keep walking the streets of Paris, Nantes, Lyon, it's because we think that maybe we might actually make it, you know. So, we must not despair, like Gramsci said, you know. Yes, it's pessimism of the intellect. That's it. The point is, let's look at things as they are, without turning a blind eye, without blinkers. So pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. That is to say, Christians would speak of hope. For us in the New Right, it's more about willpower. Let's show some resolve and try to flip the table over, you know. There you go, my dear Vincent. Yes, yes.
Merci François.
Ouais, merci pour tout. Merci. Thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Merci à toi.
We unveil women, yet another world still veils them. How can all this coexist without tension? It's not possible. You realize education is almost free. Housing is really cheap. But he should be infinitely grateful. The only way to get rid of resentment is to thank the host. It's to thank France.